Welcome to Behind the Facts, a podcast that focuses on shining a light on the individuals that work behind the scenes, curbing the spread of false and misleading information, and fostering a culture of accuracy. I am your host, Tipe Mailani, and I am joined by my colleague Lee Mwiti and Valdez Onanina, chief editors of Africa Check in South Africa and Senegal. It is a pleasure to have you both join us for our discussion today around fact-checking approaches during elections. Valdez, welcome to the podcast. It's nice to have you on.
Thank you, Tipe. I'm so happy to be there.
Lee, it's a pleasure to have you today with us for Behind the Facts.
Thank you, Tipe, and to the team for inviting me to have this conversation around what is obviously a very critical time for our electoral democracy.
Certainly. 30 years of democracy, South Africa is having one of the more followed election years on the continent. And I think it's important to have a conversation around why access to accurate information is so crucial, specifically during an election. Lee, what is your perspective on this?
Thank you. Access to accurate information is crucial during an election year for a number of reasons. And the key reason that we at Africa Check are keen on having an informed voter is because accurate information helps voters to make decisions that are based on a clear understanding of their candidates or their party's policies and positions. And this can only benefit the voter in the medium and in the long term. Accurate information also strengthens an election's integrity. So when we have bad or harmful information, then we run the risk of this undermining the electoral process by unfairly advantaging a party or a candidate. And you want both candidates and the voter to have faith in the electoral system. False information in an election, like the one we are about to vote in, also can hurt public trust because you want, you want the public to believe that their civic effort counts. And if you have harmful information around an election, then you potentially risk causing civil unrest or political instability. And lastly, informed citizens are more likely to take part in the civic process as they feel their vote counts, helping to push back against voter apathy, which is something we have seen in recent elections where the number of voters who have actually turned out to vote has been reducing with each election.
And I think that also holds water when we look at the statement when they say information is power. It's power to make an informed vote. An informed citizen, an informed electorate is an important part of any democracy. Valdez, I know this year's elections in Senegal had some commotion around them. I actually want to find out, and I'm sure our audience would also be interested in finding out, why is access to accurate information so crucial, specifically as it relates to elections?
Okay, so let's say that periods, electoral periods are sensitive times in all countries, in this sense that they are a kind of major moment of confrontation of opinions aimed at obtaining power, control over public action. So this competitive aspect make it easier in this context for tension to escalate because there is a kind of emotional aspect that comes into play, I would say. So given that the purpose of election is to choose leaders, which is a very serious matter, is therefore necessary for the public and voters to base their choices, opinions, or decisions on factual elements. Accurate information in an electoral context helps to avoid the manipulation of public opinion, which can lead to social tensions or biased choices, among other things.
Lee, not everybody is a fact-checking wizard like yourself. So what is it that they should be looking out for when we're talking about misinformation and disinformation trends during election time?
Thank you, Tipe, and thank you for thinking I'm a wizard. I wish I were, but there is quite a number of telltale signs that the voter should be on the lookout for, and which may suggest claims they're seen in the public debate are not as accurate as they appear. And some of the indicators include, one, the lack of specificity, right? Claims that are vague and which lack specific details can be a red flag. So accurate statements tend to contain verifiable facts and figures rather, and those claims that are not as not accurate tend to generalize a lot, right? Which may be a tactic of obscuring or obscuring the arguments that are behind the claim, and which will not stand up to scrutiny. We also find that claims that voters should look out for tend to have an absence of sources. So credible claims are often backed by reliable sources or data. And if a statement lacks citation or lacks sources, or if the sources themselves that are provided are dubious or irrelevant, then that claim might not be as accurate as it looks on the surface. In an heated political moment, which tends to be the norm with most elections, not least what we are seeing right now, we see a lot of sensationalist or emotionally charged language. And this tends to be a strategy to manipulate emotions rather than provide factual information. I like to say that facts typically don't need to rely on emotional appeal to stand up to scrutiny. So if a voter is seeing a lot of heated language, a lot of sensational language, or an appeal to the emotions, then they should be careful about what is being bandied around in the public debate. We also see a lot of oversimplicity. So complex issues like the ones we face in South Africa, whether it's around unemployment or wealth inequality or poverty or crime, rarely have a simple solution or explanation. And claims that try or claim to offer overly simplistic solutions to such social issues then should be approached with a lot of skepticism. And obviously, when it comes to timing and context, then again, the timing of a claim can also be telling. We are seeing a lot of heated political moments. It tends to happen pretty much in every election around the continent or during scandals, for example. So, if we see a lot of claims that are being bandied around during this time, then they are more aimed at swaying public opinion rather than providing accurate information. So again, lastly, if claims are too good to be true, then, if we find politician saying they're going to double, triple grants, for example, then probably that claim is too good to be true. So promises of easy solutions to difficult problems are often exaggerated or tend to be completely unfounded.
So I just want to find out from you, Valdez, when somebody is looking out for what mis and disinformation looks like, the trends, what are they supposed to look out for, especially during an election?
So it's very important to know that during elections, politicians sometimes they disseminate misinformation to credibilize themselves, but also to bring a kind of discredit to the opponent. So, and they are using a lot of different strategies. So sometimes they can say something, that the opponent has not said, just to say that, okay, this person is not the person who you are supposed to choose in this election. So knowing that is very important for the public to be aware of misinformation during elections. And I think it's a good position to have as voters, but not only as voters, but as observers, because finally we are observing our societies, and it's something that we have to keep on mind, specifically during the election period.
Lee, has there ever been a moment like in your elections work where there was a claim that was made that concerned you or that riled up a lot of negative attention or unwanted attention?
Absolutely. And as you mentioned at the top there, I oversee the South African office, but also I have a bird's eye view of the Kenya and Nigeria offices. And a lot of the claims that we see that cause concern to me are those that have real world harm, that which exacerbate existing tensions in a community or between individuals, or which infringe on the rights of minorities. That may be around migration issues here in South Africa, or maybe around religious conflicts in Nigeria, where we have mostly Christian population in the south and majority Muslim population in the north. And we see a lot of cleavages between these groups, and which have tended to be politicized towards a situation where we have seen a lot of real world harm, a lot of conflict happening. In Kenya also, we do see a lot of claims around relations between communities, and which tend to play to the decades-old, fissures or gaps between communities in Kenya, which have been politicized by politicians to look to get claims based on identity and ethnicity, and which have often turned to be very, very harmful, leading to lots of injuries and in very many cases, deaths. So we do see a lot of claims that concern us, which have caused a lot of injury and personal harm to voters in the 3 English countries that we work in.
Valdez, so just in finding out from you, what has been like a moment in your work where during an election you were concerned about a claim or a statement that was made in the public domain? Is there such an example?
The big challenge that we had recently in Senegal during elections is the fact that we did our work in the context where you don't have easily access to public information. And it was very difficult for us to do exactly what we wanted to do. But we did something that, that I can be proud, is that we were able to convince the public to ask us to verify public claims during that election. So we did some fact check about what public figures claimed during the campaign. And for me, it was the first victory of what we are trying to do, because at the end of the day, the idea is to really kind of critique public around election, about what politicians are saying every day, and specifically during elections.
Lee, during elections, what is one of your organization's tried and tested strategies, like the approaches that you use towards combating false and misleading information during this time?
Thank you, JP. At Africa Check, we're quite innovative. We try to experiment a lot and try to see if there are different ways of doing things. And for example, we still are thinking the holy grail is live fact checking. If we could nail down the techniques around that, then I think we'd have made a big, shifted the needle in a big way in the populations, in the debates rather. We're still working on live fact checking, but much as we speak about advances in technologies such as that, then what really tends to have the most impact in the countries we are in tends to be the tried and tested. As I like to say, old is gold, and radio broadcasting is one. Everywhere you go, you find that it's pretty much king, has a lot of mass appeal to a lot of populations in Kenya, in Nigeria, and here in South Africa. But also we have training workshops we do, and this may be both for key actors in the political process, whether it's parties or whether it's those who are involved in the civic process, for example, the Electoral Commission, but also for the public and journalists who are consumers and who are disseminators of information in South Africa. So you again are looking to create or cultivate a critical mass of people who are quite, who look out, or rather criticize the information that they come across online or whichever spaces that they may be part of.
Valdez, I'm sure your organization, even in Senegal, as the chief editor of the Senegalese office of Africa Check, I'm sure you have some tried and tested strategies that you have used. That could range from anything from working with local communities to even forming coalitions. Are there any such strategies that you guys have employed in your elections work?
Yeah, so we recently in Senegal led a coalition with media, but not only with media, but also with civil society organizations to combat misinformation during the electoral period preceding the presidential election. It was the first time to have this kind of initiative in this country. And from what we have seen so far, it has been welcomed by the public and even by some politicians. And one of the positive consequences is that in Francophone Africa, other fact checkers wish to replicate this exercise for the communities, as in Cameroon, for example, which will hold elections next year. And I say that we have chosen to work not only with media, but also with civil society organizations, because in the Senegalese context, this civil society organization, they have the power to bring more echo, or to disseminate a better echo of the work we are doing. And we saw that impact clearly during the work we did with the coalition. And I think that is something we need to keep on our mind, is that, okay, we are doing fact-checking, we are journalists, but if we want to have more impact, if we want to disseminate very well our impact as we want, we need to bring others people, not only journalists, but civil society workers or influencers sometimes, to work together and to go together about fighting misinformation, not only during election campaign, but in general in our daily work. I think it's something that is a lesson that we learned from this experience in Senegal.
And it's a significant achievement to work with civil society organizations and have such impact. Speaking of coalitions, it is interesting that you mentioned this as an approach. We recently spoke to Opeyemi Kehinde, who is the fact-checking editor at Fact Check Hub in Nigeria. And this is what he had to say.
My name is Opeyemi Kehinde. I am the editor of the Fact Check Hub and the national coordinator for the Nigerian Fact Checkers Coalition. The Nigerian Fact Checkers Coalition consists of 3 IFCN signatories, civil societies, and newsrooms working together to curb information disorder in Nigeria. Our current members include Fact Check Hub, Africa Check, Dubawa, International Center for Investigative Reporting, Center for Journalism Innovation and Development, Center for Democracy and Development, Facts Matter, NG, The Cable, Daily Trust, The Insight, Premium Times, and Digital Africa Research Lab. As a responsible coalition, we believe democracy thrives when the outcome of elections truly reflects the informed choice of the people, devoid of deceit and manipulation. Hence, our coming together in 2022 to launch a united fight against misinformation and disinformation in Nigeria prior to the 2023 general election. Our goal is to curb the spread of misinformation and disinformation in Nigeria through stakeholders' engagement and advocacy, media literacy, as well as co-produce and co-publish fact-check content, including text and multimedia formats, across all our various platforms. Founded in June 2022, the coalition in August wrote an open letter to Nigerian politicians, calling them to shun misinformation in their campaigns. The open letter was published by multiple media platforms in Nigeria. Also in September 2022, the coalition held an election disinformation conference with the theme Nigeria's 2023 election, curbing information disorder, where panelists tasked all political stakeholders, diplomatic communities, and tech platforms to help Nigeria in our fight against information disorder. Following the success of the conference, the coalition member organizations kicked off co-publishing of content immediately, thus harming the Nigerian electorate with truth ahead of the election. By November 2022, the coalition joined the presidential town hall debate series hosted by Arise TV for presidential candidates in the 2023 election, among other national and gubernatorial debates hosted by other media platforms. The sole aim was to debunk claims made by politicians during the debates. The coalition was able to conduct live fact check of some of the widely televised election debates using the Full Fact AI tool, courtesy of the support we got from Africa Check, Full Fact, and Google.
That was Opeyemi Kehinde from Nigeria talking about the Nigerian Fact-Checking Coalition and the work that they did during the Nigerian elections. Lee, do you have any words of wisdom or advice that you would like to share with our audience?
One piece of advice. I feel there's so many, but I would like to tell anyone who is listening that please let's educate ourselves on the reasons, on the incentives behind false information. This way we can give ourselves a fighting chance of breaking the cycle of false information, of harmful information, or interrupting the networks that this information tends to feed or to be part of. And so I would say in a nutshell, let's be skeptical, not cynical. Let's follow the evidence and not the rhetoric.
Valdez, for those who may be listening and seeking advice, what are your words of wisdom based on your experience?
So what can I say? I can say, okay, doubt everything, and do not automatically take into account what public figures say, especially in times of elections. This is something very important to keep on mind. So that could be my advice.
Thank you for your input, Valdez. It was a pleasure to have you and Lee join us for today's episode, and we look forward to having more conversations. Be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms. This was Tipe Mailani from Behind the Facts.